Hey, how we doing? My name's Dalton, and I'm some idiot with a wrench. Today, we're back in the garage. We're working on the small block in the Chevelle. We got to get our valve train put together. That means getting push rods in and our rocker arms and making sure that they're all set up correctly and all our geometry is good to go. Now, this is a topic that I have been dreading, not only making a video about, but actually getting around to doing. I don't feel like I'm alone in the amateur mechanic world when I say that, like, valve train and the way that that whole magic is set up seems like witchcraft to me. It's confusing, and there's a bunch of different people that have got a bunch of different opinions on how one should go about getting that kind of stuff set up. It's like a whole other, I don't know, it's a beast. I've done a lot of reading. I've talked to some people who actually know what they're talking about. Pretty sure I know how to do it correctly. So let's just dive in. I'm going to bring you guys with me. We're going to hopefully get it done and get it done right. So buckle up. It's going to be a fun video. I hope. Okay, so first and foremost, push rods. These are kind of important because I do all the pushing for the rods and all that other stuff. That's an awful joke. So anyway, these things are actually really important, and they play a pretty vital role in a push rod engine. Go figure. So let's actually kind of talk about how some of that works, because we can. And I've got it all nice and blown apart in here, a really nice model to work on. So right here is your cam. It sits right under the valley here, and it's what your lifters, these guys, ride on. It's got cam lobes, and as that cam rotates, whoop doo doop doo doop doo doop, that way those lobes move and they push those lifters, hence the name, up and down. Your push rod rides in one of those lifters in that cup, and as the engine rotates and as that lobe pushes that lifter up and down, that push rod comes up. It's attached to one of your rocker arms, and these are your valves, and it will open and close your exhaust and your intake valve, letting all the good dead dyno juice come in here, and then all the fun noises come out this side. So that's why they're called push rod engines, in case you were curious, because they utilize push rods. Now, modern V8s and pretty much all the modern motors of today, with like the LS being one of the only exceptions that I'm aware of, utilizes an overhead cam. So instead of the camshaft being down here in the middle of the engine and needing to send its mechanical information and all the timing and everything up away from it and through this 90-degree pivot up here to open valves, the cam actually sits on top of your cylinder head, and it rotates and pretty much directly impacts the valves. And that's how modern engines like the Ford modular, maybe not the modular, but a bunch of other modern V8s, like the Coyote, that's the word I was looking for, the Coyote, how they're able to have 3 or 4 valves per cylinder and per cylinder head. That's why. The push rods, you don't have enough room to stack all those push rods in a valley like that, so you can really only have one exhaust and one intake valve. In case you were curious, this is something I've learned reading about how to do the thing that we're getting ready to do. A little knowledge for you in case you didn't know. Now, here's the thing about push rods, and when you start hot rod and stuff like what I'm doing here, that push rod length can change, and there's a lot that can change it. So I swapped to a completely different style of head from what this engine had beforehand, and I'm sure that the gasket's a different size. The cam is a big one that can change your push rod length, because if you're doing much higher lift or more duration, that can have a big impact on like what your push rod can do. And there's a relationship between the push rod and the springs that are inside your head that I was just tapping on in there. So all of that can change your actual push rod length. So the first thing we need to do is check to see how long push rods I need. I'm hoping I can get away with stocks, because I really don't want to buy new ones. honestly. I'm cheap. I know I'm probably gonna get some hate for wanting to reuse this push rods that came out of this engine a couple weeks ago, but I mean, they're perfectly fine, and I know they're functional. I know that none of them are bent. This workbench that I made a couple months ago is a bad straight edge to like roll them on to see if there's any warp, but I know they're all straight. I tested them on something else. They're still good to go, and I know that I can still see through all of them. If you're gonna pick up new push rods, make sure that they're actually like hollow, because they push oil up through the push rod. It's how you get oil up into your heads to keep the valves lubricated and all that other good stuff. So I'm going to try and reuse these, but we got to make sure that they're the right size. So there are two like methods to testing or trying to figure out what length your push rods are. The first one looks easier, so that's the one that I'm going to do. It involves your actual stock push rods and marking the valve tip. I'm going to walk you guys through how I do it. Or you can use an actual push rod checker. These things, like this one came from Comp, and you can unscrew it and do some math or use calipers and figure out how long this actually is once your geometry's good to go. There's a lot of math trying to do that correctly. I'm going to try and talk about this here at the end, but forewarned, I don't really understand this process overly much, or at least I understand the theory behind it. I got a little confused in the practical application, but we'll talk about it anyway, and I'll give you guys some good resources if this is something that you want to look up. But anyway, let's go ahead and check our stockies and see if they're going to work out okay. Alrighty, so let's get to checking. So what we're going to do, I've got my stock push rods already installed here in the engine. Make sure that they are seated firmly down into those lifter cups down there. Make sure that they're not like out over here, otherwise this really isn't going to work. So you need to make sure that they're, oh come on, there we go. You need to make sure that they're where they need to be and down in those lifter cups. And then on your valve stems here, just take a Sharpie, or if you want to be really bougie, you can use some of that Dykem shit that everybody seems to love, and you're just gonna completely coat the top of that valve stem so that it is completely covered in Sharpie, just like that. Give that a second to breathe and firm up. We're gonna come over here. I'm definitely gonna remember to put the lid on my Sharpie. Now, while that's setting up, let's talk about the rocker arms that we're using. Ooh. So I've got a set of PRW Tac USA. How much you guys want to bet that they're actually made in the US? I've got no idea. They were like cheap on Summit. So I've got a set of PRW rockers. They are roller tipped, and then if you guys are going to Vortec like I am, they need to be self-aligning rocker arms to like run on Vortec heads. I don't know why. I was really bummed because I was planning to use the stock, reuse the stock rocker arms, these fucking things. There we go. But I had to buy new ones, and these guys were actually the cheapest set of self-aligning I could find. I didn't actually set out to do the roller tip dudes, but the more you know. Now, from my foray onto the internet to try and find decent rocker arms for this build, there are just 80 billion different manufacturers that make rocker arms, and they all claim to give you, you know, 80 million gazillion fucking horsepower magically and soak up all the excess friction and power loss in your valve train, and that just doesn't, I don't know, it kind of sounds like snake oil to me. But whatever, to each their own. The way that these are set up, you need to use one of these little ball doohickey dabber dudes. Goes down in there and sits in the middle of the little cup thing, and then that's where the stud goes through, and he sits here and does his little rocker arm doodabber thing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this guy, we're gonna throw him on the head, right? Make sure that your push rod gets nice and firmly seated up in the little cup thing that the rocker arm's got, and then throw your little dish guy, the bowl side down. Again, there are 80 billion different rockers. I'm sure that you're smart enough to figure out how they need to actually get installed so that they just sit on the valve, right? Now, I'm testing both the intake and the exhaust valves, because these can differ substantially, especially if you start going to like high performance setups. Here's the sheet for my cam, right? This is going to tell you what your lift is for both valves. There we go. So my intake and my exhaust, they're a little different, 0.462 and 0.469. Nice, right? So that could change dramatically depending on what your application is or what kind of cam you're using. So know that you are going to have to test both. Now, the thought process behind this system, let me get the other one set up here. So that way, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set these up as if we were permanently installing them, again with the Sharpie on the tip of the valve stem here. And then we're going to rotate the engine a couple times over, and then we're going to take these back off, and we're going to inspect the wear pattern on the Sharpie ink that we left on the valve stem here. And that's going to tell us whether or not our rocker arms are doing everything they're supposed to do here on the valve stem, and they're riding on the right part of the valve stem. Because if your push rod is too short, you should be making some more wear towards the bottom of your valve, the outboard side. And if it's too tall, it's going to be riding too high here. You want it as close to in the middle as you can get, from what I understand. If we do this and my rocker arms leave a good wear pattern and the push rods are the right length, dope, we're going to get those cleaned up, and then we're going to start the actual install. If they're not, what I'm going to do, especially if they're significantly out, I don't think they will be, because like Vortex are a stock style head for this engine, not this generation of block, but like Chevy did make Vortex and put it on this same, pretty much the exact same like casted block as this. So I'm not thinking they're going to be too far off. The biggest thing that I'm worried about throwing my geometry off, honestly, is the cam, but it's a relatively mild cam. So I'm rambling, but we'll see. Now, the other way to do this, and this is something Derek from Vice Grip talks about, I know that I talk about him in every other one of my videos. He talks about figuring out your geometry first and then figuring out what actual length of push rod you need from there.
Hey, so this is Editing Dalton once again. I proceed from this point to ramble for about 10 minutes about something that I just don't understand. I tried to do it, I tried to explain it in the video, and then I tried to do the thing that Derek talks about. And I guess my 3 brain cells are just not enough on their own to comprehend this. I couldn't understand it, so I'm just going to cut the rest of this part of the video out and just link to the video that I'm referencing here so that you guys can go and watch it from somebody who actually knows what the fuck they're talking about, because I just don't. So we're just going to move right along.
Now let's talk about how we're going to get this set up. So the way that this works is your push rods actually sit in here and they spin, right? They're designed to sit and spin with your lifter. The lifter actually spins as it rides on the cam lobe. It's part of what helps it prevent a lot of abnormal wear during like regular usage. So what we need to do is get these guys torqued down to that spec so that they're in here solidly and there's no up and down wiggle, but they're still able to sit and spin. So I'm gonna go grab my ratchet and we're gonna get that set up and get it started, but that's what we're looking for. Alrighty, so another important thing to note that I didn't talk about a second ago, because I'm an idiot, is you want to do this, I'm doing this on number 1 because that's easiest, number 1 cylinder at top dead center. I guess you don't need to do this on number 1, but whatever cylinder you do it on, you want to make sure that it is at top dead center on its compression stroke. So that means that both the valves are completely closed. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. Like most things, whenever you're starting a process, you want to make sure that you're starting from a known true 0. It just eliminates another variable. So you want to do this from a cylinder that is at TDC, top dead center, both valves are closed. So that being said, let's just put that there. Oh, put that there. And I'm just going to hand tighten this down. Now I'm starting to feel some resistance in the nut. And I'm reaching over here, and I'm like, right now I don't have any up and down slop at all. It's not wiggling up and down either way. So I'm just going to take it a little bit further. If you can see that, my push rod is able to just sit and spin freely without rattling up and down. See, I can tug and pull as much as I want, up and down. I've got nothing, but the push rod's just able to sit and spin pretty freely. That is what you want from everything I have gathered. Bring you guys back up there. Let's do the other one. Ooh. Yeah, nope. A little bit tighter, a little bit tighter. Still some rattle. Nothing. Alright. Right there. Up and down. Absolutely no up and down, but that push rod can still spin comfortably. Now, the next thing that we got to do is we need to take account for all of our preload. So what that means, your lifters, they're called hydraulic lifters, hydraulic flat tappets. They actually get filled with oil, and that oil sits underneath that cup in the spring, and it gets pumped. You've heard people talk about pumped up or collapsed lifters. It's because they don't hold oil, or they stopped holding oil, and it creates a gap in your valve train, and you can hear it rattle occasionally, or like a motor that sat for a really long time, or something that's run on not a lot of oil. Which is not something you want. It creates a lot of premature wear and damage on the engine. So you want to make sure that all that preload, all that slack is taken out. Quite simply, once you have got this set to where, again, those push rods don't rattle up and down, but they spin nice and free, attached to your rocker arm, take your ratchet, slide it over your nut at exactly 12 o'clock, and then, oh, that's set to loose. Put it right at 12 o'clock, and then do one full revolution. Half revolution. You want to go half. Set that preload. Check it again. Make sure these guys can spin. See, this guy can't spin anymore. I'm going to take that out. Take like a quarter turn out. Do another half turn. Alright, there we go. He can spin, but no up and down movement, and our preload's taken up. I'm going to take my ratchet, my Allen key tool, and lock these nuts down, so they aren't going to back off on us at all. Alright, perfect. Now, let's get to checking. Alright, so what we're going to do next is we're going to run the engine. We're going to not run it. We're going to rotate it twice. All the way around, doing 360 degrees twice, 720 degrees of movement. We want both these valves to open and close a couple times. I'm going to use El Cheeto here, which is right on the end of my crank. That's the crank bolt. I don't have the harmonic balancer or the fucking pulley bullshit thing on it, so I really don't want to hurt the threads or bottom this bolt out into the end of my crank, because that's just a whole world of nightmares that I don't feel like experiencing. So I'm using the harmonic balancer bolt, but I've stacked a shitload of cheap washers from O'Reilly's in there to keep that bolt from bottoming out inside the crank. It's going to let me rotate the engine a couple times. Not a perfect solution. Don't recommend it, but I'm still waiting on the gasket to get this guy, the timing cover, and then the harmonic balancer and all that crap back on again. So this is what we're doing. It shouldn't hurt anything, but just wanted to explain to like the three guys that watch these things what's happening right here. I'm not an idiot. Well, that big of an idiot. Yeah, let's go ahead and roll this thing over, and then we're going to take those rockers back off, and we're going to inspect our valve stems. Okay, so I have rotated the engine around twice, and if you're wondering how I did it, magic. And now we can go ahead and undo these bolts and get our rockers out of the way, and we can inspect the marks that we left. You can see here on my intake valve that I've got a line pretty much right in the middle of the valve stem, which means that these push rods are going to be good to go, at least for our intake side. Now over here on the exhaust, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a line pretty much dead right in the center, right about the same level, maybe a bit taller than on the intake valve here. So fucking awesome. Aces. We are going to be able to reuse our stock push rods, which is just fucking fantastic. You guys can probably hear my wallet screaming for joy right now. So let's go ahead and get those things cleaned up and then get them in the car. Alrighty, so set up here on the workbench. I got my bucket of various used automotive fluids underneath me and a big can of brake clean and a rag. I'm just going to spray these bad boys down, wipe them off, maybe blow some brake clean through the center orifice, make sure that they're all good and clear before I reuse these, because they are kind of grimy and old. Very old, as far as I can tell. They're the originals that came with the car. And to the 1 or 3 fellows that are watching this and you're going to give me shit for reusing push rods, there's a couple of reasons besides me being cheap that I think are worth merit. Now granted, I didn't think of these until after I'd thought about you typing your mean comment about how I shouldn't do what I'm getting ready to do. So take them with a grain of salt. But everything else in this valve train situation is new, right? The cam, the lifters, the rocker arms, the heads, the valves, the springs, the whole nine. The whole valve train is all brand new except for these guys. And if there's going to be any kind of binding or any kind of failure that happens with my valve train, I would really like it to be the cheapest and easiest to replace part, which is this guy right here, my push rods. Right? I would much rather these get bent or broken or whatever than the valves overextend and slap the piston or the cam wipe out or any of that other crap, right? So reason number 1. Reason number 2, like a fella ain't worth, ain't made of money. And I know somebody's going to say, well, you've already spent how much money on all your parts, blah, 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 blah. It's worth it, put the new ones in. Well, yeah, I've spent a lot of money. Not as much as a lot of people dump into builds like this, but a lot for me anyway. And that just seems like all the more reason to save a buck where I can. And this seems like a good place to not spend a shitload of money, especially since I'm not running boost. I'm not running a crazy aggressive cam. I'm not planning to operate in like the 7,000 RPM range on an old 50-year-old push rod style motor. So I think I'll be okay. So that's it. That's what I'm going to be doing. And if you still, oh my goodness, the straw's intense. If you still think it's a bad idea, that's fair. You're entitled to your opinion, I guess. Right? I am not known for being right all the time. For that, I would have to introduce you to the old lady. But yeah, see? Looks brand new, bright, shiny, and clean. Perfect. And this brake clean straw, it's the perfect size to shoot down on in here. Shoot down on in through here. Jesus Christ, why was that so hard to say? Pro tip for you guys: use the straw on these things, right? Brake clean goes mighty quick. It's a wonder chemical, right? In my personal opinion, I think it's probably got its own number on the periodic table, but it's a wondrous chemical and it costs money. It's fucking wow, excuse me. And it costs money, right? So try and save a can. Using the straw, you're going to get just as much use out of it, but you're going to get this same effect, but you're going to use a lot less of the actual chemical, right? You're going to have to buy more or less. Save you a buck. Speaking of my opinion, it's worth a whole 2 cents. I don't know if any of the guys watching want to hear it, but right now, at the time of me filming this, the big outrage of the day, big outrage of the day, is this whole fucking Budweiser thing. Right? I don't know when you're watching this video, but as of filming, Budweiser has caught a lot of heat because they've got a trans woman on their can. They're partnering with a trans woman as an influencer or a brand ambassador or whatever the fuck you call it. One of those sponsorship deals I'm trying really hard to line up for myself. And I've been seeing a lot of like reels or videos of people being all fucking mad and bent out of shape about it. And I'm never gonna buy Budweiser ever again, blah, 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 blah. And if you want my opinion, I think that's just the dumbest shit on every level, all the way around, right? First and foremost, if Budweiser is a beer that you like to drink, I don't know why it would be, because it's shit beer. But if it is a product that you enjoy, you shouldn't change that or get all up in arms because they've decided to partner with one little socialite, right? Somebody with a camera. Shouldn't bother you, and it seems silly to let it bother you, really. And at the end of the day, like, Anheuser-Busch is a big corporation that isn't even American owned anymore. It's owned by like Ambev or Bevgru or something like that. Some big consolidation, consortium, corporation, corpo thing. I think it's a German company or a European company now that owns Budweiser. So it's not even an American company. It's not the king of beers, never has been, or the queen, right? And the way those big companies work, like, they literally don't give a shit about anything one way or the other. Like, despite what the American tax code says, they're not people. They don't have political opinions. The only political opinion that they have is the one that makes them money. So some marketing guru that either works for Anheuser-Busch or Bevgru or Ambev or whatever the fuck it's called, or some contracted firm decided that it would be a good idea to try and go after like the youth target audience and get like a progressive trans person to be a brand ambassador, because that's kind of not been the target audience for Anheuser-Busch products for a long, long, long time, right? Young people. And it makes good business. It's like a sound boardroom meeting strategy, but like, it's not, they don't have an actual opinion. They don't give a shit about trans rights. They don't give a shit about you. It's literally just a marketing thing. They've got no skin in the game either way, except when they make more money. So to be upset at them for doing this and take it all personally, I think is just dumb as fuck. And if you're somebody who's pretty far left and you think it's a great idea, a great thing that this is something Budweiser's doing, good for you, man. Just know that it's not meaningful change. It's just cents on a spreadsheet. That's all it is. Anyway, just, if my opinion's worth 2 cents, both sides are really dumb. Nobody's got a right. Nobody, you got a right, but nobody should be celebrating it, and nobody should be really fucking mad about it. I think it's dumber than fuck, personally. But that's why I get paid what I get paid, and the people that ran that campaign get paid what they get paid. If you know what I mean. The other thing is, I guess, if my opinion's worth anything to you, like, this whole reaction that the right has had to woke culture and wokeness and everything, I get it a little bit. Like, I kind of understand it. I'm not by any means like, that hit me in the face. Fuck. Blah. Like I was saying, I am not by any means like a radical leftist Antifa dude, right? But I really hate the attitude that a lot of far right people have about this kind of stuff, because like, at the end of the day, man, like, these trans people, and you can have whatever kind of opinion you want about it, I guess, like, they're still people. Can you imagine, can you just put yourselves into the shoes of one of these trans people who feel like their whole life, that there's something so innately wrong with them that they are willing to put themselves in all kinds of medical debt to get all these surgeries and hormone therapy and all this other stuff done and be ostracized by half the population. Go through all of that because they feel so incredibly uncomfortable in their own skin. Like, all the political feelings about how you feel about trans people out of the way, one way or the other. Regardless of if you think it's real or not, like, that's gotta be a really incredibly difficult place to be. To have that kind of, like, image of yourself. Like, you hate yourself or the way that your body is so much that when you look in the mirror, you don't feel right on such a fundamental level. It's got to be worse than, like, the body dysmorphia that, like, us thick people have to deal with, or I don't know. It just sounds awful. And I can understand being frustrated with, you know, pink-haired people on Twitter calling you a transphobe because you don't want your daughter wrestling against a dude. I got my eye. Ugh. Back with protection. Jesus Christ. I've been maced, and this is worse than mace. Fucking wow. Anyway, like I was saying, man, like, I can get you not wanting your 14-year-old daughter to wrestle against a 14-year-old man, right? Boy. I get that reservation. Despite what all the pink-haired, like, granola chicks on Twitter will tell you, like, that's a valid concern. I'm not smart enough to tell you what the answer is one way or the other on what's, like, the right way to handle that, but just having some basic human empathy for another person that has got a much harder road to walk than I think a lot of people who are mad about this whole situation. I don't feel like it's too much to ask for. I don't. But that might just be me. Okay, so 1, I'm off my soapbox, and 2, all my push rods are clean. They look pretty good too. Not quite new. Some of them didn't clean up quite as well as some of the other ones, but hey, they're good enough for me. And they're all nice and see-through now. I got all the old oil and gunk cleaned out of the center of them after I maced myself with that fucking brake clean. Now, the next step is going to be prepping everything so we can go ahead and get it onto the engine. So, I am going to be using this Comp Cam and Lifter lubricant installation lube, quite simply just because it's what I got, right? I don't have a big tub of engine assembly lube. I went and checked, and this stuff is like the same, so I'm just going to use the big bottle that I paid for because I can. Now, it says specifically for cam and lifters. I don't know if it's rated to be used with, like, the push rods and the rockers and on the valve stems. Did a Google, and nobody says I can't. On the listing on some of the websites, it lists the push rods as, like, the things that you use it with. So I'm assuming it's going to be good to go. My only reservation was, like, this stuff is really sticky. So I don't know if it's going to, like, stick into my push rods, but I don't know. The internet seems to think it's fine, so I'm going to give it a shot. If my push rods snap or the oiling situation doesn't turn out the way I want it to, I'm going to know who the culprit is. Me, for being dumb and not buying the right lube. But, you know, whatever. We're going to live and we're going to learn. So I'm going to put a whole shitload of that stuff down in here and on these guys, so this stuff is nice and lubed while the rockers are doing the rocker thing. And then I'm going to put some on the valve stems and on either end of the push rod. Make sure that everything's going to be a-okay. So I'm going to getting this stuff lubed up, and then I'll pick you guys back up whenever I'm back under the hood and starting to slide these rockers back down onto their eventual forever home. Alrighty, so I've got all my push rods and rockers and everything back in the engine, and it's actually starting to look like a real engine again. Never really thought I'd see the day, but I kind of got to because I'm looking at it. So I went through and just put all my push rods in, obviously, but before I did, down in all the little lifter cups, I went ahead and put a big dollop of that Comp Cam lube over there, put it down in there, and then I put a good sized dollop on every valve stem. And then after I threw all the rockers on, I put, well, before that, I put another dollop on the top of each push rod. And then after I got all the rockers on, I put a big dollop inside each one of the little rocker cups, and then a whole big thing on top of each one of the rollers. Probably used way too much, but too much lube is never a bad thing. Just ask your girlfriend or your wife, right? If you have any doubts. So they're lubed up. Now, the thing I got to do is what I showed you guys when I was checking my push rod length. That is literally how you set your rockers and your blah 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 thing in the valve train, right? You just keep tightening that bolt until you can't move it up and down anymore, but the push rod can still spin, and then you set your valve lash. There's not a train near me. There's just some asshole with that horn set up that lives near here, and he just likes to blast that occasionally. So anyway, God, that distracted me. Anyway, so I'm just going to go through all the cylinders and make sure that they're all set the way that they need to be set using that method. Now, here's the cool thing, a little pro tip that I got from the interwebs. We're on TDC on number 1. This is my distributor map, by the way. I drew a map of all the plug wires coming off the distributor when I pulled the stock one off, just so that I would know like which spot on the new distributor I need to run wires to, because I'm an idiot, right? And I'm a visual learner. And I kind of wanted to do, whatever, I'm rambling, right? I drew a map. Now, number 1 is at TDC on the compression stroke. Number 6, directly opposite on your firing order, the exact opposite cylinder should also be at TDC with both the valves closed. So in theory, I should be able to do cylinder number 1 and then come around and do cylinder number 6 without having to rotate the engine over to get the next cylinder in the firing order up to TDC on its compression stroke, right, on its firing stroke. And if you look, right, this is number 1, and it's really dark because it's late, but you can see that both my lifters are all the way down, meaning that those valves should be closed, which is what lets us set them properly. I just covered my fucking hand in that sticky comp lube. If we look over here to cylinder number 6, right, because in case you didn't know, it goes 1, 3, 5, 7, and then 2, 4, 6. So this cylinder right here, that's 8, 2, 4, 6 right here. Both of those lifters are all the way down in their little lifter bores too, which tells me that that cylinder is also completely at TDC. Both valves should be completely closed, so we should be able to adjust those at the same time. And then you should be able to just roll your engine, I think like a quarter turn over. Looking at the next cylinder, right? So we're gonna do 1 and 6. Move the engine, rotate it over by hand until you see number 8 close all the way, and then you can do 8 and 5. Pretty cool, right? Gonna save you a lot of heartbreak and hassle and everything, cranking over that engine over and over and over and over again. So hopefully, anyway, I'm gonna check it out. I'll pick you guys up and let you know if it works or not, but that's the plan. Cool, let's get to it. If it sounded like I forgot to say something there, it's because I did, and I'm gonna say it now. After I get everything done, right, all of the cylinders lined up the way that they're supposed to be, doing that map I just showed you, I'm going to rotate the engine 2 or 3 times constantly, right, rotate it with El Cheeto, and then I'm going to come back through and go over it again and make sure that there's absolutely no play in any of those push rods and that everything's still lined up the way that it's supposed to be. I will let you guys know if I run into any issues and what the final verdict looks like whenever I'm done. Alrighty, different outfit, different day, same idiot. I finished up the other night. I was losing the light, the magical lightning and the recorder cube was dying, so I just went ahead and blasted it out. It took me about half an hour. Everything is set, you know, all my rocker arms are torqued down and all the blah blah blah. You guys watched me do that when I tested the push rod length over here on number 1. I just did that whole process minus the Sharpie on the valve stem because I knew that the push rods were good. So cool. I also showed you earlier in this video how to do like 2 cylinders at one time using my handy dandy map, and one of two things happened there. Either all those fancy videos and forum gurus and tech manuals that I read are all wrong, or I'm an idiot and I misunderstood the directions. I'm gonna let you guys be the judge, because I wasn't able to do 2 cylinders at once per thing. I don't know. Something might be really, really wrong, or I just didn't understand what I was supposed to do or how I was supposed to be able to do that. So whatever, I just did it cylinder by cylinder down the firing order, just rotating it until I saw both those lifters go all the way down and stay down, knowing that they were closed. Those valves are supposed to be closed, and then I made my adjustments and took out the preload and all that other crap. So yeah, disregard that or watch a better guide on how to do it. And that's pretty much where I'm going to end this video. I don't really know where I'm going to go next. I'm going to look at my pile of parts, walk around the car a couple times, maybe have a beer, try my damnedest to think really hard. It's hard. The lights start to flicker and all that other stuff. So just wanted to say, if you've made it this long into this video, I really appreciate it. Words can't really describe how much I appreciate it, that people are actually starting to watch my stuff now. I know that there are probably 80 billion other better like valve train videos for hydraulic lifters on the internet, and the fact that you hung out and watched mine means the world to me. So thanks. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Love you guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.